Hi, my name is Kira. I tend to forget to introduce myself, so this is what that is. I am a Seattle-based storyteller, writer, podcaster, you name it. I just really want to share the gospel and share how Jesus truly changes everything. So this is your invitation to stay. You can find other episodes as well as my blog, any other important links, all in the description. Also, you can check it out on kiragauthier.com. That should have everything that you're looking for, but there is grace here, there is love here, there is truth here. I hope you enjoy today's episode. I want to share this interaction I had with someone at the gym. Well, I don't know if you could call it an interaction because I didn't say anything. But I want to share this story because I think it will help you, Christian friend, who is prone to freezing like I am when I hear aggressive claims that go against Christianity. So I share this for a few reasons. I think we can all learn from the things that I did right. We can learn from the things I did that were not so great. And I share this with you so that, now at this point I am held accountable for the future conversations that will come. Pray for me in these future conversations because it's not easy. It's really not easy for me to talk about Jesus in person. I get very nervous and anxious about it. So you're not alone if you feel the same way. But I also share this story to my listener who hates Christianity or doesn't believe in the Christian God and or has a big problem with Christians. Hi, thanks for tuning in. Please stay and make yourself comfortable. I think you will significantly benefit from this story as well. So the conversation started because Terry, and we're going to use fake names for privacy purposes, but Terry was saying that everyone should be vegan as animals were not made to be eaten. So Jenny, who was next to me, a Christian, she mentioned that, well, the Bible does say that humans can choose to eat meat. So in the Old Testament, yes, God did prohibit the Israelites from eating meat. But now, because of Jesus, Christians have the freedom to eat meat if they choose to do so. All right, there's a difference between the ceremonial laws, civil laws, and moral laws. All right, context matters. But the conversation over which commandments to follow is one for another day. But the answer's in the Bible. So if you're curious, just read the Bible. It'll tell you. It's pretty clear. Anyway. So if the Christian decides that they want to eat meat, well, they can. And that's what Jenny was sharing. That is the moment where Terry started to challenge the Bible. These were some of the claims he made. God said it? Where? Jenny responded, the Bible. Terry responded, well, people wrote the Bible. Like, God didn't write it. In fact, I have a friend who studied the origin of the Bible. He used to be a Christian, but then he looked into the research and saw that there was this big gap between when it all happened to when it was recorded to when it was transcribed. Plus, the Bible has been changed numerous times. That's why there are so many versions. You can't trust the Bible. Now, I'm making his responses as concise as I can because it was a mini rant, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to stay silent. I wanted to hear all the claims he was making. I wanted to hear his issues with Christianity, and all of his claims are valid and quite common. And I will respond to all of those claims, but I share the story to reflect on that experience. And hopefully, my Christian apologist who's listening, you can learn how to better respond than I did, and all for the glory of God. I chose to stay silent for a number of reasons. I began to notice that as he was going on this little rant, I was getting red, like tomato red. And thank God that it was dark in the gym. And it's silly now looking back on it, but it was as if I was getting mad for God. I was silently angry. And if we know anything from Greg Koukl's book, Tactics, which I made an evangelism mini-series on, if I was already mad, I already lost. I already lost at that point. And honestly, I'm a little mad that I was mad, but this is why I decided not to speak. When it comes to defending the gospel, I want to be gentle and loving in my speech. I knew I couldn't do that if I was already so emotional. So I just let him speak. I let Terry speak, knowing that I will see him every Wednesday and knowing that I will have more chances to talk to him about Jesus. All right, you heard it here first, all right? So keep me accountable. As he was speaking, I was thinking critically about everything he was saying and paying close attention to word choice and sentence structure. In the past, I would have let his claims go in one ear and then out the other, and I'm not proud to admit that. But that's not good. Here, you can't do that. That's actually quite dangerous. So now when I hear offensive claims, I reflect on the journey that led me to the research in the first place. When I started digging into the history of the Bible a few years ago, it was not because I was trying to prove that God exists, but rather I was looking at what is the best possible explanation of reality. I listened, and I really listened as Terry made his claims. Even before I left the gym, I was repeating that conversation in my head because I have a terrible memory, and I ended up writing it down on my notes just so I could remember it. Did you catch the claims that he made? He first mentioned that the Bible was written by men. He claimed the Bible has been changed numerous times. He said there's a huge gap between when everything took place in the original text. And I'd say one of the most important sentences he said was that he had a friend who is a Christian, or who was a Christian, who studied the origin of the Bible. So that tells me that Terry hasn't done the research. He's going off of what his buddy said. And that's not necessarily wrong, but that means as I continue to ask questions in the coming weeks, he may be looking into the research for the first time, and that's pretty exciting. I don't know, I'm excited. I'll go off on a little tangent. This is not something I would bring up to Terry, but I'm going to talk about it for educational purposes. As we've talked about with rules of logic, the claim that is made must be backed up by the evidence that supports the claim in its context. So this implies that there are several things that don't technically matter when it comes to claims that are made. Technically, character doesn't matter. Just because sweet old Susan said it, that doesn't mean it's automatically right. Not everything Donald Trump has said is technically wrong. We need to judge each claim for the claim itself, with the evidence that supports that claim in its proper context. Job title is also one of those that don't technically matter. All right, scientist, doctor, technician, engineer, teacher, custodian, everyone is wrong at some point, regardless of their job title. So when Terry mentions that his buddy was a Christian and then renounced his faith, yes, that's meaningful, but that technically doesn't mean the research he did was entirely accurate. Now, these are my thoughts and convictions, but I think it's important to not be so logically focused. This is coming from someone who's pretty logical, but as Christians, I think we need to be tender-hearted and emotionally present as we seek to share who Jesus is and share who Jesus is in a way that honors him. We are ambassadors of Christ, after all, right, Christian? What good would it be to stop him right there and point out the logical fallacy? Sure, like there are times and places where it is appropriate to do so, but there's a balance to it. We're not called to be jerks, right, friends? Even with the friend you have who, unfortunately, has been hurt by the church and is therefore ruled out a good God because of it, like, though there are flaws within that line of thinking and that reasoning, that's fine, man. Just be tender-hearted. It's still meaningful information. Back to the gym conversation. So now that I've learned Terry's claims and problems with Christianity, my next step is to look at what he said. If I could have controlled my emotional response better, I would have started asking questions. This is how I wish I would have handled it. By asking this, when you say the Bible was written by men, what do you mean? If Terry said something like, well, men make mistakes, then I would have asked these types of questions. What about the books in your library? Is there a reason you find the Bible less reliable than other books you own? And from there, based off of his answers, I would have asked more questions. But to the first question, if Terry said something like this, God did not physically write the Bible, I then would have asked something along these lines. Do you think that if God did exist, he would be capable of using humans to write down exactly what he wants? Why or why not? And then, based off of his answer, I would have asked other questions. As long as you keep asking questions, the burden of proof is not on you. Christian friend, do not be afraid to ask questions when you hear these challenges. I think this approach works really well because it gets the both of you thinking. So moving forward, my plan of action is to pray about this like crazy. I want to ask Terry the right questions, and so I'm praying for wisdom and guidance with that, and I'd appreciate your prayers as well. Like, I'm really nervous, but this is what I'm called to do, and I'll keep you updated. But now, after doing some research, I think it's about time to answer some claims. Understand that with each of these claims, I could make an entire episode backing them up, and maybe I will, slowly, over time, but here's the short answer. So the first question, did God write the Bible? 2 Timothy 3:16 reads in this way: all scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. The key word there is breathe out. So that does not mean that God physically grabbed like pen and paper to write scripture. It's more accurate to say that God's authorship was accomplished through the process of inspiration. Inspired men wrote the Bible. And you may be thinking, how can the Bible be reliable if imperfect people wrote it? And listen, it's true that people make mistakes. However, it doesn't follow that because people make mistakes that they will always make mistakes with everything that they do. So this is why we test the reliability of the Bible. How does it line up with other sources that were written at the time? How, does it name real places? Does it name real events? Does it agree with history and archaeology? Can God use people to write down exactly what he wants? Absolutely. And he has. But that's all I will say for now. Was the Bible changed numerous times? It's a fair question, as we've all played the game of telephone. Like, as kids, early on, we learned we can't properly transmit a message linearly through 8 people. Like, how can we expect the Bible to be reliable? However, with the Bible, Transmission was not linear, but rather geometric. So it's a common misconception to think that the Bible was like the game of telephone, when in reality it wasn't. It began with one original letter. So for example, there was one original Gospel of John, and scribes meticulously copied this to create what we call written manuscripts. So one letter birthed 50 copies, which generated 500 plus copies. And we're talking about one letter for now. The Bible contains 66 separate books. It's all held together by one spine. But when we talk about these manuscripts, understand that we're talking about several separate documents. The New Testament has 5,686 manuscripts. For comparison, Homer's Iliad has 643, Plato has 7. The Bible was not changed numerous times, and we can check this by looking at similarities and differences between the several copies. But I gotta tell you, even the copies of the Bible are very, very accurate. You may be wondering, well, were there differences between copies? Of course, but they were minor differences. So you still had more than enough information to get the main message across. Like, the vast majority of these differences are strictly grammatical. So think of spelling or punctuation. When we look at the accuracy of the copies, Homer's Iliad is 95% pure. And the New Testament is 99.5% pure. The 0.5% in question does not affect a single doctrine of Christian faith. That's pretty impressive. Sir Frederick Kenyon says this: "The number of manuscripts of the New Testament, of early translations from it, and of quotations from it in the oldest writers of the church is so large that it is practically certain that the true reading of every doubtful passage is preserved in someone or the other of these ancient authorities. This can be said of no other ancient book in this world." That's pretty remarkable. These copies were barely different than the original, 99.5% pure. And to the last question, when was the Bible written compared to when it happened? If you were to say the New Testament document was inaccurate due to the gap between when it all happened to the original text to when these manuscripts were made, well, then you couldn't trust any other history book today. The major works of the New Testament are eyewitness accounts, and these were written between 15 to 40 years after it happened. That's well within 2 generations, and this is important because historians will tell you it takes about 2 generations for a myth to take place. So if anyone wants to start some crazy lie about me and you want it to be successful, just wait at least 2 generations. Then it's much more likely to catch on and be considered as the truth. Or you gotta wait 2 generations though, okay? But start that nasty rumor then. So with the New Testament, the gap between the original text and its copies is 25 years. With Homer, it's 500. With Plato, it's 1200. That's almost laughable. When it comes to the New Testament, we have more manuscripts, earlier manuscripts, and more accurate copies of manuscripts. The authors of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist say this: "We know we have the same New Testament that was written down nearly 2,000 years ago. But the next question is even more important. Do we have an accurate copy of the truth or a lie? In other words, is the New Testament historically reliable? And this episode is already a little too long, so you can check the miniseries for that answer. I did a miniseries in the summer that briefly goes over evidence for God, but I'll probably do a future episode on this. I have found the New Testament to be historically reliable based on the evidence that I looked into. And I know I'm not formulating the most logically sound arguments, but hear me out, because it's still meaningful. It's a common misconception to think that the Bible and its manuscripts arrived like the game of telephone, but that's not what happened. It's common to think that the Bible is filled with errors, but even when we look at the differences, it's not at all really that significant. It has to do with punctuation and spelling. It's common to think that the authors of the New Testament would wait years upon years to start writing about what they saw, but in reality, they started recording it very early compared to any other text that we study today. I have found Christianity to be true, and what this means then changes everything. That means that Jesus really did come to this earth. It means he really did die on the cross and resurrected, as it is recorded, as it is written. It means that Jesus is Lord, and he came to save those who believe in him. There is hope, there is certainty, and it's found in Jesus. It's found in the gospel. So I just invite you to join this journey and see who this Jesus is. I invite you to try out the Christian worldview and see that there is good news, and it's found in the gospel of Jesus Christ. He came to save. All right, his name is Jesus, and he loves you like crazy. Jesus changes everything. Would you be willing to see who this Jesus is?